But when we did an inspection, they actually put the nappy changing in the ladies. So I asked them, if I bring my 3 kids to my own water park here, where do I change? I guess what was a bit scary for me was it's quite a young team that designed it.
For women influencers, they have less negotiating power on how much they should get paid, a difference of more than like 49%.
In Singapore, over 70% of women agree that gender discrimination exists in the workplace. At the same time, standards of masculinity limit the choices that men can make. Men face stigma when they choose to be stay-home fathers. And many remain silent when they experience abuse or harassment because they are afraid of admitting their vulnerability. There's still a long way to go in understanding the complex differences between standards set for men and women. Can equality between men and women be achieved? And with us today, we have some very esteemed guests to share their insights. First, we have Member of Parliament Louis Ng from Nisun GRC, who has raised issues like parental and childcare leave in Parliament. Next, we have Nur Hikmah, an advocate who has written and presented on women's development within the Malay Muslim community. And we have Halynne, who is a product manager at Shopback and the director of data innovation at the Young Women's Leadership Connection. To kick things off, how does gender inequality show up in cultural discourse, say on social media, or even in our day-to-day lives, for example, in dating and relationships?
I think in one of the recent examples that we can see in social media that's quite obvious, it was during the Night Owl Cinematics co-founder Sylvia Chan. I think she was exposed online for her lack of professionalism. There were also other criticisms which were also directed at her as a woman. So I think we need to separate two things. First is her as a person, as a woman, and then secondly, her as a boss, as an employer. To criticize her as a woman just for the fact that she's a woman, that's misogynistic.
Yeah, I think in the workplace, women are expected to have a perfect conduct of how they should behave. This was quite apparent in the recent happenings of the Finnish Prime Minister Sanna Marin, where photos of her going to a private gathering and dancing were harshly criticized. She was even pressured to have an apology as well as take a drug test for what she did. However, in other countries, some of the male politicians who have behaved in so-called in a more outrageous way, going to even crazier parties and having topless photos of themselves leaked, and yet they were not criticized as harshly.
There are still gendered expectations and pressures on both men and women to behave in a certain way. Like, for example, men are the ones who out to pay, you go out and eat or go out for dates. So these gendered expectations, they actually place a lot of burden on both men and women. So typically when we discuss about like women's issues or like gender equality, we tend to think that it burdens women and it's more of a women's problem, but it actually affects both men and women equally.
How can we apply gender equality to other aspects of society, say politics, economics, even social situations? And in your opinion, and I will come to all of you, how far along are we in that process?
If you're asking me about Singapore, I think we've made quite a bit of progress, but I would like to say that there's still many ways in which we have to improve on to be able to actually achieve gender equality between both men and women.
The different industries, we have STEM. So in STEM, actually, there is already a large proportion of gender imbalance. Specifically, 50% of women feel that they have experienced gender discrimination at work. And 20% of them feel that they did not manage to be promoted due to their gender. It's actually in terms of education. So for early childhood educators, less than 1% of them are actually male. The parents think that they are not nurturing enough or they are seen as like predators. A lot of females feel that they are very hesitant to go on maternity leave because when they come back, they feel that they are probably a burden to their team. On top of that, they are also very worried that their careers might stagnate.
That's one of the biggest issue. Because there's some studies that show that our policies might reinforce this gender stereotype. And I think the crucial one really is our paternity and maternity leave. I mean, if you give mothers 16 weeks of maternity leave and fathers 2 weeks, we're sort of signaling again that the person supposed to look after the child is the mother. And you reinforce the mindset, father goes to work, mother stays at home to look after the children. And I say that it's a very vicious cycle because the children see that. And the children grow up thinking that, yeah, daddy goes to work, mommy stays at home. And I think that's why we need to change that. And I think we need to view this not as a zero-sum game. It doesn't have to be, but we have to reduce the mother's maternity to increase the father's paternity leave.
So, Louis, I'm so glad that you are pushing for more paternity leave because I'm not a father yet, but at some point in future, I hope I will be.
Soon,
And
right?
soon-ish. It's something you're clearly very passionate about. Did it stem from any experience you had?
So when I had my pair of twins, Katie and Poppy,
Mm.
I mean, that was difficult because they were born premature.
Mm.
So they spent about 2.5 months in ICU. So quite clearly, 2 weeks of paternity leave wasn't enough. By the end of 2 weeks, they were still in ICU, still fighting for their life, and very difficult to go back to work. I keep stressing it. I mean, in Parliament that uh, it's hard to be very productive when you know your kids are in ICU, struggling to survive. And that's why I've been pushing for more maternity and paternity leave. So mothers and fathers can have a chance to spend some time with the children when they're born. When I shared it in Parliament, I was in tears really to share my story so that others won't have to go through what I go through. The next, which I think many of us talked about, was the workplace discrimination. We got to rewind a bit because a woman faced the penalty of being a woman even at the job interview stage. It's also important to legislate the tripartite guidelines on fair employment practice because we need to have proper penalties in place. So not many people know now, but when you go for a job interview, they technically cannot ask you whether you're married or whether you have children. If they do, then there's some penalties, which is strangely a curtailment of the workplace privileges. It's a bit strange now if we say you discriminate against women, the penalty is we don't let you hire foreigners. Something is not in sync there, and I'm glad again we're responding positively. I've pushed this for many times now, but I'm glad again we're going to legislate the tripartite guidelines.
There have been a lot more discussions around the topic of gender equality in mainstream consciousness over the past few years. Halynne, do you have any other examples of the issues that women face in the workplace?
So there's a study that says that women are over-mentored but under-sponsored. We need a lot of people who are at senior positions helping to speak up for their female employees. However, this is not happening at a very high percentage right now because there are still some attitudes whereby if, let's say, a male boss speaks up for the female employee, people might think that they have a very untoward relationship. Also, in Microsoft, some of the recruiting managers will get extra bonus if they hire a woman or someone who is of a different skin color. I think that this might even breed resentment if it's not handled sensitively because other employees might feel unfair. They see this female employee who's hired just as like a token diversity hire.
I think that could also result in discrimination against men in some way, which is also a problem. I know for certain industries, for example, HR, which tends to be female dominated, statistically, it is harder for men to break through because they also face stereotypes and discrimination there.
Well, I guess the stakes are quite high for me.
Mm.
I have 3 daughters, so I sure hope there's gender equality, but I think it's important. I'm not speaking up because I have 3 daughters, but because it's the right thing to do. And all of us need to make sure we do this right thing now.
I think gender equality is an ideal. It's something that we strive towards. We move towards achieving a society where we are all truly equal. And I think as human beings, we should always try to be better versions of ourselves.
Thanks to our leaders, to Louis for pushing so many of these initiatives. We have the white paper today. Right now, we are allowing the elective egg freezing for women aged from 21 to 35. And on top of that, there is also the Council of Board Diversity. We hope to aim for 25% female representation on SGX listed companies by 2025 and 30% by 2030. In this sense, we need to ensure that the access to resources as well as opportunities for women should be made more equal. Let's say a man who wants to be a makeup artist or to do makeup videos, or a woman who wants to do weightlifting or become a research scientist, for example. Both of their dreams and aspirations are equally valid and we should support them equally as well.
So a lot of optimism on the couch, which is great. If you are keen to find out more, you can check out 2 books. The Time Has Come, Why Men Must Join the Gender Equality Revolution, and The Power of Women, Why Gender Equality Works for Everyone. You can find that as well as other resources at your nearest library and on the NLB mobile app. Now to end off, I would like to throw you a question. Do you think gender equality can be achieved? Leave your thoughts in the comments below because we would love to hear from you.